Hey there, Squirrel Army. Today we're discussing, is the value I'm giving away worth it? If you're enjoying the content here, you can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing and turning on the notifications. Alright, so there's a lot of cards that are out there that give your opponent some kind of benefit or slight upside or perhaps downside to your card for you playing them. Like, let's say Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, because those are two of the most iconic and, best examples of this. They give your opponent something for you taking away something of theirs. Swords gives them life, Path gives them a land. Like, Assassin Trophies, really another one of these that's pretty darn good as well, and played pretty heavily as well. Beast Within, Generous Gift. I'm mostly talking about removal here, but again, there are, for the most part, those are the cards that, you give away this value, quote unquote, to opponents. There are a few other ones as well. The new Contraband Livestock and Wild Magic Surge, and whatnot, Chaos Warp, just as I'm saying that, because that jogged my thought to thinking about Chaos Warp as well, and things like that. But again, there's a lot more other cards that do give your opponents additional value, like Rites of Flourishing. I'll put that one in there, because that's a really good group hug card. There's a few of those quote-unquote group hug cards that maybe you might think about, but overall, I'm just saying, is the value that you're kind of giving away worth it? And it does come to a case-by-case basis sometimes, and whatnot, and it depends what kind of your strategy and whatnot is sometimes with some of these cards, because some of these cards are these group hug cards or seemingly group hug cards. Most of the time, it's like, well, they're not doing that just to help you. They're trying to, win in their own unique, specific, certain set of circumstances, which requires you to draw extra cards, have extra mana, etc. It also benefits them. Like for the most part, a lot of these cards do benefit the controller as well. Like, I'm not talking specifically too much about swords, because obviously that does benefit you in a sense. You're suddenly gotten rid of one of the biggest threats on the battlefield or whatever, but hey, beyond that, it doesn't really help you that much. You've gotten rid of a threat, and you've lost a card, so you've traded a 1-for-1. Like, that's why board wipes and whatnot are a lot better, because you've traded 1 for 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever creatures or whatever it is. So that rate is a whole lot better. But anyway, you can't run 50 board wipes unless your deck's a bit weird and wonky and whatnot, or whatever anyway, or you're just a control deck. So, but anyway, beyond that, you've got to look at, again, like cards like Fumigate or whatever. Even though I don't think everyone gains life with Fumigate, do they? But only you gain the life. But there are cards that are like Fumigate, and I can't remember them all, but again, there's cards that are out there like that each opponent, gains life equal to the creatures that they lost, or there's actually the one that's the opposite as well, isn't there? The black one that everyone loses life equal to the number of creatures they lost, and Massacre Worm, whenever a creature dies, they lose 2 life. So there are the positive ones and there are the negative ones. Obviously, the negative ones are a whole lot better, because you're not giving away good things in a sense. You're giving away that bad things or things they don't want, and you're also getting a good effect. So those won't really count here. I won't really talk too much about them, but we'll talk more about the ones that, do that sort of thing where they do give opponents some sort of value. Winds of Abandon was one of my favorite cards for a very long time, because I was like, oh, cool, this gets rid of everyone else's stuff. And then, like gives them a whole bunch of lands. And I hope that that's not going to be relevant most of the time, and I can just be like, okay, cool. Well, now I'm going to come from behind or come from my position, which was maybe moderate at best, and then take over the game, and if not win, be very close to winning. Like, and for a while I thought, well, that's, decently good. But then it started to becoming like, wow, this card never does what I want it to do anymore, where it's like, okay, I'm really far behind. So I'll board wipe. And like before it would be like, oh, okay, cool. Well, I board wiped, so that slowed everyone down a little bit, maybe. But now I think it hasn't, because again, it's one of those cards that, wow, they had a whole bunch of creatures on the battlefield, so now I've just gotten most of the lands that were in their deck out of their deck, so I've really deck thinned for them, and now they have all the mana that they could basically ever need for anything that they play, and if they get any kind of, you know, effectiveness going, which means that they can get through their deck and start getting more and more cards, they can just rebuild so quickly from that. They get their commander back, and then they get a few more cards and whatnot, and suddenly, wow, they're back to having a better board, as good or a better board state than what they had when I board wiped, and I haven't really gotten anywhere in the few turns that it took them to get back to where they were. So I haven't helped myself. So that's where this idea came from. It came from me playing a card and being like, dude, this card's pretty good, to being like, man, I wish I wasn't playing this card anymore, because it's, even if, yes, it doesn't affect me, and that's why I started playing it, was because I was like, I don't want these board wipes to affect me. I want my stuff to be left alone, and I just want to hit people with my stuff so that I can get advantages and whatnot and get ahead and whatnot. And I think that's what kind of everyone does. But again, I just started finding that the value of me giving away all those lands to people was like, oh, wow, this is bad, like, even if though it's basics, yeah, even when you're like, yeah, maybe they'll only get one or two basics, because if they're a 4 or 5 color deck or whatever, they probably won't have a lot. But again, even then, like the other decks that are at the table that are like, oh, I'm mono red, I'm mono green, or whatever, or I'm just a Selesnya deck, or whatever. You do see all kinds of different decks. Not everyone's just playing 5 color good stuff piles or whatever, or 4 color good stuff piles or whatever, and things like that. Like, again, so everyone has a different, combination of decks, and everyone has a different combination of land bases too, because some players are very budget, and it's like, well, all I've got is basics and maybe 1 or 2 duels or command tower and like exotic orchard and things like that. So that's pretty much all I've got. So it just gives them way too much stuff. Now nearly all of their deck is gas from here on out, and they've got the mana to cast everything that's pretty much in their deck as they get it. So it's just one of those things where I was just like, dude, I'm never playing this card again, because it just gives my opponents way too much value. And they come back from nowhere, and then I'm in an even worse position most of the time than when I wrathed with that board wipe. If I was in the really good position of being able to, get through that, then it would be good. But, like, I never have seemed to be ever since I was, started playing, kept playing it a few, like, last year or whatever it was. I was like, oh, okay, this was good for a little while, and then it's just like, nah, it's never been good since then, and it just, every time I'm in the worst position and just can't do anything, and I have to wrath, so, because otherwise I'm dead, but as soon as I wrath, well, now they've just got all their mana, and now they'll just rebuild, and wow, okay, well, now I'm just in the same position that I was in, or even worse, again, before the wrath that I just did, so, and I haven't really gotten anywhere. Wow, that's really sucks for me. So, yeah, I just started deciding that the value in that card wasn't worth me playing it. Now, your results may vary on that and whatnot, but for me, I just moved on because I was like, oh, okay, cool. I need something else, and even if it costs me some of my board state or all of my board state for the most part, you know, I need to get rid of my opponent's stuff so that I can get the advantage. And, like, again, if I spend 2 mana on Vanquish the Horde, at least then I can be like, okay, cool, well, I only spent 2 of my mana, so hopefully I can rebuild from that other set of mana that I've got open on the battlefield to be able to get ahead and get going back on the game because I've wrathed my board. But hey, well, I had to because, well, if I didn't, I was dead. And, again, not giving my opponents any value from that, and me only having to cast something for 2 mana, probably pretty good, even if I have to set myself back. So that's a question that you've got to ask yourself. And like with Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile, I think Path to Exile is 100% worth it because even saying that it gives my opponents a land, it's only one land, whereas Vanquish the Horde, not Vanquish the Horde, Winds of Abandon, sorry, is, several lands a lot of the time. It's like, well, that's just too much. That's too many. Like, if it was one, overall, then that would be like, oh, okay, cool. You get one land for your 50,000 million whatever creatures that you've got there, or you get one for your one creature, whatever you had there, whatever it was. That would be really good, obviously, but of course that's not the way that it works. But again, yeah, that's one of those things. Like, there are some things that you could say would work with it if you're playing a lot of present effects and whatnot, no searching effects or whatnot, or if you're playing some of those effects where if an opponent has more lands than you, or if an opponent played lands outside of, like whatever it was, playing them as their land for turn, they bounce them to the hand, and then it's like, oh, okay, cool, well, I'll just bounce all my lands to my hand, and then I have to discard them when it gets to my turn or whatever. But then again, you get to play one of them or whatever. So it's one of those things. But anyway, I definitely think Swords and Path are definitely worth it because just like exile removal, premium removal again. That's why I liked Winds of Abandon because it was exile removal. So that's really useful. But yeah, like there's a couple other ones, as I said, certainly, and that are out there. And like I say, there's a lot of different ones that you can sort of assess, but I can't assess every single one. So I'm only going to assess like a few of them here because, again, we would be here all day otherwise. So, yeah, like, I think, like, Contraband Livestock, obviously, yeah, super duper worth it. Baleful Mastery, when you play it for the 2 mana cost, super duper worth it. Just letting somebody draw a card. Like, again, you have that. I know some people don't believe in the whole political value or don't get into that game sometimes, but again, to me, that is useful sometimes, certainly, because, again, hey, my other opponent, Alex there, hasn't done anything since turn 2 or 3. So, you know what? I don't think that at this point, me giving him one extra card is going to do anything. Or, my friend Damien over there, he got board wiped early and he, like, overcommitted and, like, whatnot. And now he really isn't doing anything and has been just top decking lands, or that's all he's been basically doing. Either that or he's just been top decking lands for the whole game anyway and hasn't really been doing anything. So, hey, it's turn 7 or 8 or whatever it is now. 13, 14 maybe, who knows. Me giving him one card for me being able to exile, Josh's Blightsteel Colossus is definitely worth it. Plus, again, exile removal is premium removal, so I'll take that slight downside of, me having to make someone draw a card for 2 mana. You know, as that downside, um, yeah, that's fine. Wild Magic Surge, again, I think I was talking about this in a fairly recent video, but again, like, just destroying the thing, and, like, you don't know how many artifacts or enchantments or whatever somebody's running. Perhaps you might know how many creatures or planeswalkers they're running, because it depends on what deck it is, or depends how you know someone, or someone's deck. But again, you might not know the exact number. You might be like, oh yeah, I know they probably run a few or whatever. But hey, like, you might get that time where, like, well, actually, all the other enchantments that they had in their deck, or they basically had no enchantments in the deck, but either way, they had no other enchantments in the deck when I blew up their enchantment. So it was just blow up their enchantment and nothing else happened. Or I had to made them shuffle their deck, and that was it. Like, so again, like, the downside sometimes can be, like, not really that bad. Like, I was talking about Skullwinder a little while back, and a few people were like, I don't really agree with you. I don't again, I said about the political value earlier. I don't really agree with you. I don't really think that the political value is a real thing or whatever, and I don't really get into that game. I get that from some people in games, as I sort of say, but to me, like, again, when you talk to people and you have that moment to be like, hey, let's cut a little bit of a deal, it is well worth it. 100%. You can't solve every problem on your own um, when somebody else is dominating the game. And hey, like, sometimes you can pull out that win when you do get that other person's, help. And again, these cards are those conversation starters. Sometimes you can get that moment of, like, well, this game wasn't really going anywhere, and I don't really think I could have opened up to my opponents otherwise, other than finding this card and saying, hey, you know what, opponent? We're in the predicament together, so let's help each other out. Or let's turn this game around, make it interesting at least. And sometimes that doesn't happen, where you're like, oh well, I don't really get it, or whatever, like, or whatnot. And again, like I said with Skullwinder especially, is that you can just target somebody who has no graveyard and be like, hey, Steve, oh, you got no graveyard? Sorry, bro. Oh, I was trying to help you, I swear. I didn't realize you had no graveyard. And things like that. So again, like, you can be a bit of a, like, meme lord or whatever about it as well. Like, you can be like, oh, Steve, I'm gonna choose you. Oh, what's that? Sorry. Oh, bro, I didn't realize you had no graveyard. Sorry, bro. I can't help you then. Oh, sorry. But I did try to help you, I swear. So we're friends now, right? Things like that. But again, it does depend on whatever, and things like that. But hey, again, you can have that. Like, again, I know some people don't buy it, but again, it really does help if you say, okay, we're going to cut a quick deal right here, right now. If I play this and I'm going to get this back, can you get your Swords to Plowshares back, or whatever it is that you've got in your graveyard to kill Alex's thing, and that'll help us both out. Again, we're in a sticky situation, so we might as well work together right here, right now, and I've got the card to make that happen. So, and if somebody doesn't want to work with you, it's like, well, you know what? It is what it is. They are going to do what they're going to do. But hey, again, you're always assessing that downside to some cards, and there are some cards that are like that. Hey, it has a small downside. I know some people are like, well, I just won't play the cards that have this slight downside, and I'll just play Eternal Witness because, well, I don't have to think about it, or I don't have to consider any of the other options, or I don't have to get involved with my opponents, or them, now going to backstab me or betray me or whatever after this or whatever. But certainly when you're in that position of, like, oh, okay, cool, I haven't really got any other options. Yeah, sure, I could just play Eternal Witness and get back Swords to Plowshares or whatever it is in my graveyard that I need to, deal with a problem that I do have, or whatever it is. Again, you could get that board wipe if you do happen to have it in your graveyard. But again, for the most part, if you don't have that board wipe, or if you don't have the thing that actually deals with the thing, hey, look, the board wipe that I've got in my graveyard only deals with creatures, or it only deals with enchantments, whatever it is, or artifacts, whatever it is. And the thing I need to kill is a creature, or it's an artifact, or it's an enchantment, or whatever it is. So the thing I've got doesn't deal with what is on the field, or I need to deal with two things, and I can't deal with those two things because the one thing that I have got only deals with one of those things. Okay, well, if I could get my opponent to deal with one of those other things, then at least I would have more chance, and we would both have more chance. And hey, I could deal with my other opponent there, Steve, at any time because he hasn't been doing anything since turn 3, except playing lands or whatever and just top decking lands. So he's no threat to me right now. Maybe he'll be a threat to me later on, but hey, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And for right now, Alex is the big threat. So, again, I would rather work together with somebody and be like, hey, and it's more fun and more interesting than just being like, oh, okay, cool, I get one thing back and I get an answer for one thing, and then I'm like, oh, okay, cool, well, I still can't deal with this, so I still die or whatever, and then Steve also loses or whatever, and it's like, wow, that was the end of the game. If we both work together, sometimes you can have that moment to be like, okay, cool, at least we can survive for a turn or two, and then if we find out, oh, shit, Alex really did have the wombo combo and we were dead either way, so, or not. But again, you never know until you never go to that extent or whatnot. But again, wrapping up to getting back to the end of this is you've always got to look at each card separately and say, well, am I willing to give up this much value on this card with these downsides to my opponents? Again, like Path Eggs or Swords to Plowshares, can be used on your own stuff. I've done this before, especially in my Omnath deck. I did this once back when it was a tokens deck. I exiled one of my tokens to get a landfall and then made like several tokens off of that. And was like, okay, cool, that was pretty good for 1 mana, and got a whole bunch of other effects and whatnot for that mana. So it was well worth it, and it really helped me out in that game. So, again, you can be like, hey, well, these can be used on my stuff as well. They're not just offensive cards, they can be, offensive in the way of dealing with my opponent's stuff, but they can be offensive in the way of giving me extra value. So, again, you might be like, well, I'll take that as well because, hey, sometimes I might be, able to use it on my own, which is why, I'll say this quickly about Dire Strain Rampage. It's a really good card, I think. A card perhaps I, skipped over when it first came out, and I was like, that's not that amazing. Since playing it, I've actually been like, oh, actually, that's pretty darn good because, I can harrow myself, essentially, at sorcery or instant speed. I can't remember now. But, hey, that's fine. That's okay. It has flashback as well, which is okay. It can also deal with my opponent's stuff, and they get 1 land for whatever it is that I destroy, and if I do destroy a land, they get 2 lands. And even if I maybe destroy one of my own things, I can be doing that in an offensive way sometimes. I can be like, well, I know this is probably going to get blown up, or this card's just not relevant, or again, you can just have that random token or whatever it is just lying around and be like, well, this just isn't serving me enough purpose anymore, so I'm just going to get rid of it and get, some more advantage out of, another card that happens to be in my deck, so it can be used for multiple purposes. So that when you find cards that are like that can be a little bit sneaky, I would take them as well because they can be extra good when you're like, hey, wait a minute, I can actually do this to myself and actually get a benefit right now. So that would actually help me way more than being able to destroy relatively nothing that's on my opponent's board when I'm ahead. It's like, well, how much further ahead do I need to be to win to a degree? But again, it's one of those things. You do need to be able to close things out and protect your position when you're in that position. And it's very difficult to do that. So, yeah, it's always about the flexibility of cards and how much you're willing to give up for certain cards anyway. But anyway, guys, as I say, you can let me know what you guys think. Am I so wrong about any of this and whatnot? You can let me know your thoughts. Write them down there in those comments. I'll be sure to respond to any and all comments. But yeah, if I don't see you down there in those comments, I'll see you in the next one.